Before we get into the video that I've already recorded, I just want to summarize the events right here, give everyone a quick TLDR for anyone who doesn't want to sit through many minutes of me reading a 32-page document. After recording, editing, and having some time to think of it, I would describe the situation thusly. I do not believe that James Wicks set out intentionally to scam people out of their money, take it, and run, cackling and laughing into the distance. After everything that I have read, what I genuinely believe is that he wanted to start his own animation studio, but he had literally zero experience in running an animation studio. So he took on way more contracts than he could ever actually reasonably fulfill, outsourced literally everything, couldn't manage the directors and artists worth a damn, and the entirety of his studio was hinging on just a couple of projects. So the second those went to hell, the entire studio collapsed, and he had nothing in reserve to keep things going if those didn't pan out. And because of pre-existing mental health issues, plus the added stress of watching his studio collapse around him, not only did the studio collapse, so did he as a person. And now, because of his failures to manage this brand new company, not only does he no longer have a company, not only is his mental health in the shitter, but he is also being sued by all the people he took contracts from because everyone is so unhappy with what he put out there. And now that I've gone ahead and summarized the situation, I'm gonna go ahead and play all the clips that I've already edited. So everything from this point forward is a live reaction to the information as I receive it. It seems Studio Cell has in fact released a response. I am very anxious to see what he has to say. First off, I will openly state that I, James Wicks, did delete my Twitter handle when the dogpiling was en route. That was my choice, but I did not bring down the defunct Studio Cell or any other Twitter handles where this response will stay and be picked apart. But I am hitting it full on. Just to clarify some information, when you retain an animator, artist, etc., typically a deposit is paid to ensure that you do not take on extra work and for the time period to ensure that they have money up front. First thing of note that I want to highlight, he admits that he dropped the ball with maintaining a payment system that works successfully. Second confession I want to highlight. I will not lie, there were many things that started too late and were not put in the right order of production that caused a lot of headaches for people, including most importantly, Giri herself. The final product that was delivered for the animation was not good. There were some scenes that needed complete reworks that one animator alone took on fixing most of them and hiring out other animators to correct and fix them due to internal disputes. My communication on the delivery date was shit, clearly shit, and with the expected delivery by Giri at the end of February 2023 and the final being delivered on March 2023 with even more corrections needed, I took until May 2023 to deliver an acceptable final piece, and this required scrapping all current sound design and music. He was working on a project for Nemu. He hired out and paid several board artists and animators to begin the project, but they did not meet the deadline. Girl DM began in October 2022 and ran congruently with the production of Oni Giri, who, I would like to remind you, is a project that they were falling behind on, so they very clearly did not have the time and resources to take on Girl DM when they were already behind on Oni Giri's project, but he still chose to take on Girl DM's project. He then talks about how in November, he started a contract with Saruei with a very rushed deadline that was conveyed by Saruei. And then he admits the studio could not support a direct project. So again, this is the second time he has admitted he's taking on a project that his studio could not support. And yet again, we see him outsourcing work and bringing in other animators and third parties to assist and direct the project. Saruei had conflict with the outsourced director he hired, there were delays, and there was so much frustration that an argument broke out. There were multiple problems such as artists not meeting expectations, direction not being listened to, and artists not being able to fit within the scheduled timeline. Then Saruei basically said, fuck it, I'll do it myself because she had so many issues with the director and became the art director and director of the project to ensure that quality was being maintained. He talks about a contract with Giga and mentions some numbers. He talks about a contract with Vienna and mentions some numbers. He talks about a contract with Hannah and gives us some numbers. He then talks about he had a contract with Bao, and he says that there was a depositing error of $15,000 through the original deposit because the original $7,500 deposit was accidentally double paid and a return failed, and the difference rolled over into credit for the project. Now, the other girls who have called out James Wicks insist that he was doing this repeatedly and intentionally in order to push back beyond the PayPal disputed transaction to date. According to James Wicks, the reason that Bao's project was delayed is because he wanted the lyrics for the song from Bao, and she did not provide the lyrics to them, and that's why it's delayed. He then blames Bao again, saying we could never get a meeting aligned to progress forward. James provides screenshots, but these are very straightforward communications of just negotiating the process, and everybody in these screenshots seems to be on board with the process. So these screenshots don't seem particularly relevant because it's just them negotiating and getting along and things moving forward. This is the second time where he insists that he did in good faith try to refund them, but there was some kind of issue and he wasn't able to. James goes on to show a shit ton of Discord messages between him and Giri, all of which were overwhelmingly positive. However, on this screenshot, he pauses to say this was the final communication before disaster struck on March 17th, 2023. I had been at war with the Giri production team from Studio Cell and broken NDAs that caused a massive client distrust with the Giri project. And he said, she said wars broke out due to company issues for Studio Cell and related projects. The Bao production server was empty, my communication blocked, and that did me in. So just to clarify what he's saying here, according to him, everything with Bao was behind schedule, but otherwise totally hunky-dory up until his issues with the Giri project started, and that completely set everything on fire. And yet again, he admits, I did not cope well with what was going on. And as I'm reading through all of these details, one thing that comes up over and over again is how this Oni Giri debacle caused a knock-on effect that caused them to not be able to keep up with other projects and give all these other projects all of his focus. Now, at this point in the document, James tries to do what I would describe as a plea for sympathy. He talks about how he's suffering from a disease, and with the business collapsing and his own mental health being shit, he attempted suicide on March 18th, 2023. Now, even though I 100% understand that mental health is a serious issue, suicidal ideation is a serious issue, if I sound unempathetic to his struggles, it is simply because he's been accused of lying so intensely by so many people that my bias is telling me that there's a chance he's lying about this too. I will leave that up to you. I genuinely want everyone watching the video to go into the comments below and tell me if you think that this is a totally reasonable reaction to having the company fall apart, or if you think he's full of shit. Let me know. I'm very curious to hear what the public consensus is. He goes on to claim that he was ambushed by legal representation. He goes on to admit that he did not get the funds back to Bao appropriately within that first week of him being out of the hospital. He denies the idea that he blocked Bao and maintains that he was in constant communication directly with Bao. He states that he has turned everything over to a lawyer. As far as Saruei's project, I feel like it's best summed up here. Saruei's project was a living nightmare from beginning to end. He details issues with the third parties that he's hired, he had issues with payments, he had issues with the talent, there was infighting between the talent and the third party. The whole thing fell apart in spectacular fashion. He goes on to describe that he was going through a medical situation during all of this, and says he'll go into more detail about this in part 2. Then he goes on to say how Vienna contacted him, she heard about how Studio Cell collapsed and how her deadlines weren't being met, so she wanted to pull out and get a refund. He goes on to state that a refund was issued, but it failed. This is the third time he claims that he issued a refund and it simply failed. Why? He never says, he just insists it's a technical problem that's not his fault. He goes on to talk about Captain Hannah's project and simply states that all funds have been returned and provides screenshots of him refunding her. There's this segment here about conventions, but I have no idea why this is included and it sounds like he doesn't either, so I'm gonna skip this entire chunk. So we've gone over a lot of details, so let's go ahead and just do a quick TLDR, a quick review. James Wicks started a brand new studio with nothing but a relatively small investment to get things going. He outsourced to third parties, which he did not manage properly, and it sounds like he really had no idea how to manage these third parties properly. And it seems to be the situation that the talents gave him very tight deadlines, and the animators he hired simply did not meet those deadlines, and this caused conflict all throughout the board, with the talents arguing with both him and the third parties that he hired. No one was agreeing, deadlines being missed, creative differences, and throughout all the chaos, the studio, this brand new studio that he had just founded, completely collapsed. He went into a mental health crisis, which meant everything that was already on fire got even worse. Payments coming in weren't coming from the correct accounts, refunds going out were for some reason unable to be applied. Everyone involved is angry and unhappy. Now all the talents have banded together to slander his name and slam him with lawsuits because they are so pissed with his management. And in my opinion, it is immediately obvious that he took on way too much work. He had no idea how to manage it. And because he had no idea how to manage this chaos, because it sounds like he legitimately had no management experience at all, the whole thing went up in flames. But at the end, that is only my takeaway. That is ultimately just an opinion, and I am very interested to hear everybody's takes down in the comments down below. Do you think he's being honest? If you think he's being honest, do you understand and empathize with where he's coming from when it comes to stress, management, and mental health? Any and all thoughts, I'm happy to hear him, but that's all I've got for you guys right now. I'll keep you updated if part 2 contains anything interesting or relevant. Bye guys.